Good. So welcome to this, at least here in Asia, pretty late evening to discuss the mobile stack that we want to use for the open source map application. And I want this to be a lot of discussion today. Before that, I want to just give a quick intro, especially for the people that maybe haven't been in all the previous meetings. So maybe just a very quick introduction. So from our team, there's Anastasia here, who's doing primarily our front-end development, and Sam, who is doing our back-end, and Tai, he's doing the community engagement. And then thanks a lot for the community members that are joining here. So I have only two things for today, introduction and discussion should actually be a lot, but just a very, very quick introduction before we jump into really specifically discussing and drawing on the experience here in the community, what stack we want to use for the mobile application. So the map application that we have started to develop, that's actually already online in a very, let's say, first version here on the map under map-in.airgradient.com. Everybody can have a look. We obviously want to have a very powerful mobile application. And what you can see here on the top right, we have a very talented graphic designer who is already working on some kind of mock-ups here. You can see, like, for example, different air quality levels have some really nice artwork. So that's all in the making. And I think what's really important here is that no matter what stack we use, that the mobile app is really like beautiful designed, also like obviously, you know, fast, responsive, and all these kind of things. So the first kind of big work package we work on is really developing this app for the web as well as the mobile. And the key features that we want to have, obviously open source, otherwise we wouldn't be here and speak. Also vendor agnostic, we have that here already. So we have a lot of like monitors from OpenAQ that we pull in. It's not only about air gradient monitors, it's really about making use of all the air quality data that's out there. Then I mentioned this already, easy to use. I think localization is a really, really important aspect. We work with a lot of communities all around the world, and you know, we are all English speaking, but we're actually the minority. So we have actually super interested groups in South America that would love to use this application. And one of them in Ecuador said actually only 5% of the people they work with speak actually English. And we have another really interesting project running in Laos, in the neighboring country here, with UNICEF, that's focusing on like creating more air quality awareness among students, for example. And also there, I think, you know, like a lot of people just don't speak that well English. And so localization, I think, is very important, very accessible. I think what was also a really important point that came up in actually the discussion we had last week is that I think a big group of the ones that we want to reach might be on like older generation of potentially Android phones that, you know, they just don't have, you know, as much money as we and can always have the latest gadget. So to also have something that performs well on older devices, which I didn't list here. And then obviously from the features we discussed that last week, there's also video up if you want to dive into that. It's informing about air quality, creating awareness, giving some health information. But really the topic today is really more on the technical side, like what stack do we want to use? On, let's say, maybe this is more backend related, but yeah, we really want to integrate a lot of QA, QC models too. You can see there's no QA, QC done. You can see like one spot falls out completely here on that map. So this is something we need to handle on the back end, which is also separate from that discussion. But obviously it's important that, the app shows really accurate information. And also, as discussed previously, is like we want to really showcase the communities that actually, work on the ground on creating more events around air pollution. Let me see if I added, so maybe just to as a starter, let's say if you ask like what are the things that I want to get out of that discussion today, it's mainly two things. There might be more. Maybe I didn't really think about everything yet, but one is like, what is your recommendation or your thoughts as a community? Should we basically use cross-platform, by the way? So our front end here is based on Vue, on the Nux framework, and there's a capacitor, which actually would allow to do some kind of cross-compilation to Android and iOS out of that code base, theoretically. We didn't really try it yet. But then obviously there's these complete native implementation that have their own advantages. But so this would be a really interesting discussion with, I know we have a couple of people here that are very familiar with mobile development. I think what makes it not necessarily difficult, but at Gradient, we don't have, I would say, a lot of native research, like experience in native development. I know that Sam has some on iOS, and maybe a few of our developers a little bit on Android from a long time ago, but we don't have the same level of experience like we have on the back end and front end. That doesn't need to stay the same. We can also look at basically getting more resources on our side, but it's definitely a limitation, which brings me to the next point, like how can we potentially get more contributions to help us especially on the mobile side, and because of that kind of limitation we have ourselves, or how can we, if some of the community members here have information or ideas, like, maybe there are some interesting ways we can tap into some communities that might be interested to support us, because I think as an application, I think it's super interesting. It's completely open source. It could be something that people are actually interested to work on. So that's like my introduction. I can't really look at the same time in the chat. Let me just see. I mentioned localization. That's really important in case somebody came in later. Low vision. I think that's important. I didn't mention this. So I think when it comes to the design, yes, basically this accessibility is important. I think also really, I think a big group that we want to reach are really like, let's say, very, very local people, like for example, in Laos that are affected by air pollution. We need to make sure that the information is like not only translated in different languages, but also really easy to understand, I think, for the users. Do people actually expect Care Need iOS app? I don't know, but that's actually something that I want to discuss today. So maybe we can start with like, are there any general questions right now on like the app? And please, like, ideally we can really discuss that also verbally if you guys want, but I can also read the chat. So maybe first question is like, any question regarding like kind of what we envision at the moment, how that app should look like. Or is that relatively? Leo, I see you unmuting.
Yeah, I don't have really a question. I guess I'll just say like, so I've just for my experience, I've been developing native Android for 15 years now. And so I'd probably be naturally the last person to say what I'm about to say. And yet here I am. I think that it makes sense to prove it out that this is a worthwhile app that people want to use with a PWA, especially given that you guys have the web experience to make a web app. Obviously, like the dashboard is already, works fine on mobile. Of course, it would be, it would be better as a native app probably, but not like so significantly. And so I would just say like, instead of having, needing triple the resources or double the resources, initially making a web app, a mobile, PWA mobile web app would be the much more expedient and much easier and much more resource efficient way to do this. I don't think that there's anything that I've seen in the design so far that would say like, no, this definitely has to be native or else it won't work. I don't think that's the case.
Timea, please go ahead.
Yes, hi everyone. My background is in web and mobile also. However, I worked with React and not with the Vue side of things. But I had the same kind of thinking what Leo was just saying. This is why I asked if the web technology is locked into Vue, just, pulling all the strings out there. I also looked into I didn't realize the Vue part, but I did look into present time comparisons and cross-platform solutions, at least on the React side. Sorry, I looked into the wrong thing, but they're closing in on a lot of the things that we would really need. And if I understand this right, Ahim, please let me know if I do. We only need a map to show the data points, and we need the push notifications. Do we need anything else from the native side that we are not aware of?
Let's say, I think we need to distinguish probably what's really core features. Obviously, push notification is a core feature. We looked into things like, iOS has a really nice lock screen feature now. I have that actually here on my phone, which would be nice to have, for example, but really a focus is nice to have and maybe not necessarily we need it very early on. And I'm actually not sure with PWA and push notifications. If I know with the cross compilation, this would probably be fine.
I did try to play with that.
Yeah.
Just I did try to
I think
play
it's a
with
very
that.
recent feature, right, from PWA. It's like, so I would be interested if people actually have experienced PWA push notification. Does that work relatively well or not? Anybody here have some?
I can tell you what I experienced, and then we can give it to someone else, because we tried. What we tried was exactly for this, to create a notification for customers. And while the browsers are on paper supporting it, it was a bit of a pain. It's not a pain to technical person, but to a non-technical person to explain that, okay, you need to go to your browser. You need to save this to your home screen. Then you need to remember that that's not an app, it's an actual, it felt a little bit like even my partner was in business and very technical minded. She didn't have the patience for it. So I have doubts on this side, but this was about a year and a half ago. So I don't know if it got better since then. I don't see how it can, because you kind of need to bookmark it. I don't know if anyone else had an experience regarding this.
I think you're absolutely right to focus on the installation experience, because the number one thing that's going to matter is that people can get it and install it, and it looks like all the other apps that they're used to dealing with. So it might be that the best approach to do is to make native apps that have access to all the native functionality, but are really just PWAs under the covers. So then we can prove it out pretty cheaply and sort of move things to something native as necessary, or as they've earned that. because I think that there are going to be a lot of things like this that it just doesn't really, you know, you hit a wall and then you have no choice but to tell everyone to go and install a new app.
Yeah, I think that's also like actually our roadmap is PWA, and I totally agree with the installation experience is not great, and I think especially the people we want to reach might be actually even challenging just installing a normal app, you know, because they use in Asia it's Line and or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. That's kind of their life in that ecosystem, and already getting them to just get a normal app installed might already be a step. Like, let me just see a little bit on, or maybe Anastasia, could you keep an eye on the chat a little bit? Because I'm not a multitasking person. I have one more thing maybe to throw in this, because we were already thinking about what would happen if we basically make native apps for iOS for Kotlin, and then basically first just display a web view which mirrors what we have on the web, which is obviously probably similar to these cross-compilation things, but kind of starting really with a native installation. And then and then basically look, okay, what performs well, what doesn't, and then maybe start, you know, replacing certain features into a true native implementation. Is that something that people have experience with, or you know, would recommend or not? I'm not sure if that's meant with this native apps as PWA wrapper. Probably goes into that direction. Is that correct?
So I'm kind of like Leo here. I just wanted to give a little bit of an intro. I've been doing Android for about the same amount of time as Leo has. And I've also done a little bit of iOS over the years. And I would take a little bit of a different, I mean, I would, let's say, I would suggest a little bit of a different approach, which is to start with a very simple app, but make it like just perfect, as great as we can make it for like this one main, like what everybody wants. And, you know, we could do like little prototypes of these different approaches, and maybe, you know, someone wants to do the web app in a native app like Achim was suggesting, or someone else wants to do the cross compilation of the existing app, or someone, maybe me, wants to do a little bit of a different approach, which involves more native, both on iOS and on Android. Make a prototype of those two. I think maybe, you know, just doing little experiments, like, but is on a very small scope, would help us, you know, make it come to a decision about what you know, what the preferred approach is. Personally, my and I'm not a power user of Air Gradient, even though I just ordered my outdoor monitor also because there was a hole in the map, so I want to fill that in. I live in the middle of Los Angeles, and so I'm not a power user, but I do like, my main thing is I want to be able to see the air quality in a very like almost passive way. That is, I don't want to have to go and open an app or do something. I just want it to be there. I want it like, so for me, on I guess I probably can't show my phone easily, but for me on my Android phone, I have a widget sitting on the home screen. You can see it maybe a little bit there, the yellow. So that's what the current air quality here in LA is. I'm also a bit of a UX nerd, so the yellow, green, and stuff, like, because it's like right now it's like just above 10, and if it was just below 10, it would all of a sudden be green. Like, it's a little bit too binary for me, but anyway, that's what I want. That's what I need. Unfortunately, that widget is not air gradient. I don't think you guys have a widget. But for me, that's just that really simple use case. And I think that with the current technology, that might be hard to really nail it on iOS and Android. So anyway, those were just my thoughts. And I'm happy to hear what everyone else wants to say.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for sharing. Maybe I can just throw in, and I think a lot of you guys think also, okay, native is just nicer, no matter if it's an Android native or iOS native. I like the idea of, yeah, maybe doing some prototypes, not only just to get the prototypes, but also to see actually like how much can we actually really engage the community. I mentioned earlier, like we have a bit of a lack of native resources, you know, so having actually, and I think it's actually a great idea to get something out simple but really polished out, you know, because that could just attract then people, and they say, oh, this is already really cool. You know, it already helps me with that very specific main core feature, basically, and that could help us attracting more people than actually jumping on that basically application and helping us to or contributing to it. So I think that could be an additional great effect from just getting something out of the door relatively quickly.
Yes, I agree completely. And also, if you have an app that is really useful for some very basic use case, then you start having a community of users, and you can get feedback from them about what they want, rather than us sitting on a Zoom call and trying to imagine, you know, of course, then you have to summarize, you have to aggregate, it's a lot of work, and you don't just take every little like feature that everybody suggests, right? But you are basing it actually on the community and what people really want and need, instead of, and then that helps guide towards useful features that people will love and use.
Yeah, good point. Timia raised her hand just maybe one sentence before that. So from our side, from our grading side, I mean, we are super happy to put in a lot of resources, also just managing the project, no problem. That's what we're already doing. It's just that at the moment, it's actually not easy to really find good developers and stuff like this. So it's just like on the mobile developers, we just have a certain shortage kind of at least at the moment. But like putting in resources to manage communities and finding all these features and making these kind of calls and, you know, getting the groups together, it's no problem. That's what we can do. Timia, please go ahead. I think you're muted.
I realized, yes, thanks. Yes, funny that this is how you took the conversation, because I was considering a couple of things that should be part of the decision, and not only the tech stack as it is, but long-term, how can we do this long-term? So you kind of answered first about the internal resources, about how many devs we have already. You mentioned we have someone who knows some iOS and some other who know a little bit of Android, so that's helpful. We need to consider not just the existing talent pool. You say you're willing to invest. That's really good to hear. Also about maintenance. Like if you do something where the code base can be shared, and there are versions on how to do this, I think that would be a really good way, even if we do this wrapper native, but inside shared code base. If you could do that, then it would be a lot easier to use, however amount of the devs we have, so we can, you know, solve multiple problems at the same time. I have a design related question though, because again, we are only talking about technology, but if we are developing for multiple platforms, especially native, where the promise is that you can use native components, but per definition, the Android native components and iOS components look and feel different. What do we think about this? Because if you're concerned about this and we're going to spend extra energy on making them look the same, then we might as well go with a cross-platform thing, because we're not going to use those inside components minus the map and the push notification. So I'm curious if you thought about this.
I mean, I can, yeah, go ahead. I want to be actually the last one answer.
Yeah, you're definitely, that's a concern and needs to be addressed and thought of. And one solution that Leo suggested and that I was also thinking of was to use what's called Kotlin multi-platform. So you get native, well, it's the components look the same and they're themed to look familiar on both Android and iOS. So that's kind of when I was talking about a prototype, that's on both Android and iOS. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, so that's just one approach, but definitely a significant, that's something you have to think about. And also another thing is, like when you're choosing a technology stack for your mobile development, you also want to think about how many developers there are for this particular stack. For example, if you choose a multi-platform approach, you're depending on which one you use, you're going to probably attract more of one kind of developer than the other. For example, if you choose something web-based, then you're gonna attract web people who are, you know, experienced in web development probably. I think there's a lot of people like that. So that's definitely a plus, and you get to reuse the you know, the existing expertise and code base and everything. But you're not going to attract probably very many mobile app, you know, specialists in that case, or at least less. Some people are positive bots, but anyway, that's those are probably like those are pretty rare people. And then on the other, and if for example, like if you use Kotlin multi-platform, which was what kind of like my preferred platform, the downside of that is that you're going to probably not attract as many native iOS developers, because there are some, you know, even though it is, you can do, and there's different ways to do it, but there's always going to be some kind of like extra interaction between the native iOS code that they're used to and then this multi-platform part. So you'll, like, by choosing, but of course, I'm only talking here, I'm talking about developers. And of course, there's also lots of advantages, right? At any complicated decision, there's always going to be pros and cons. And I like to present both. So I just talked about the developer side, you know, like who you're going to have as developers. But then, I mean, there is also this core advantage of doing cross-platform, which is like you get to have basically you theoretically you're going to do less work, and I can go into the theoretically versus the practical part more, but I think I've already talked enough.
Yeah, I think that's also, I'm smiling because a long time ago I did some cross-platform. Anybody remembers Adobe Air and Flex? Maybe some of the developers. And yeah, it was like you get to 80% and then you basically get stuck more and more until it just doesn't work anymore, at least not the way you want it. Great. Matev, can you go ahead?
Seems I don't lost camera, but all right. I've been trying to understand everyone's thoughts, and I saw that everybody has a different background, a different set of expectations, a set of experience, a different set of thoughts on how to approach this problem, and everybody wants to solve it their own way. Hence why I wrote the comment, why don't you first start with a parent of root structure where all the information actually comes from, and then solve this problem by just providing the information, much like how Frank is trying to vocalize this, that you can't just go and tell people what you need based on your agenda, because then that'll attract that specific sort of developer. But I feel what you're actually trying to do here is get every developer who might have an interest in this to contribute somehow. So it seems like if you were to have lots and lots of different candidates, lots and lots of different candidate outcomes for the UI or the front end, that you could just cherry pick among them. Like, what did people like on this one, maybe on this one? The workload, of course, I'm probably not rationalizing fully because there's a tremendous amount of dedication and work that would have to go in. But even if they're ugly, thoughts and ideas might flourish better with tangible examples. So how to make that easier to get to flourish, even if simple? If, for example, publish something on F-Droid that people can install and see how that goes. Or maybe somebody thought of like, I want to have this here or something else, even if it's just Figma. I was just offering that as a chain of thought that's, I feel, has been emerging on the side to make it inclusive, not just from the user perspective, but from the developer perspective as well. I don't know if that tracks. Are you guys, am I still retaining your thoughts, or?
Maybe I can say a few words and then others can mirror their thoughts. We had a call last week to actually define the features of the app. There was a lot of discussion on how exactly should this app look like. So that's actually why we didn't bring in any, let's say, mock-ups or Figmas here. But I think it's a good point. Like for me, I was just kind of totally separating the two issues, but yeah, maybe that's not the case because obviously developers also want to see like how does the app look like, and not only talk about technology in an abstract way. But we are working on that. Matthias, I can maybe send you an email later with some of these results that we have. Go ahead.
What I was trying to express is, if there was a path to navigate here that would be less effort, where it could be where everybody could pitch in with tangible things and concepts, then having if that kind of strategy or path were to exist, I would love to hear if you guys have any experience on that, because otherwise it's going to be a chicken and egg situation where we pick a stack, go there, and then fail to attract certain niche developers in a certain market and get stuck there. How do we pivot from that? I'm trying to say to keep the options open, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's going into that direction. I think like I see a few things we can do. I mean, first, like have a really good, let's say, API description as well, and like kind of maybe onboarding for developers. No, I'm not sure if we want to go then, and that's matter. I still don't understand 100%. Like, do you propose then a bit like people will just develop their own app separately, or?
Well, GitHub has a feature called fork.
Yeah.
So why not let that? I mean, you basically have a community vote or something. I don't know if that would work. It's an idea, maybe to consider. That's all I'm trying to share.
Okay. Good. We have, like, let's say, more questions, opinions. I can. Nastya, is there anything interesting in the chat? And actually, I want to show you one thing. Yeah, Nastya.
We have an idea, basically another suggestion to use Ionic. So it is pretty much aligned with the idea to use something cross-platform. So, and to integrate Ionic into our next application.
Okay, but that's basically kind of, okay, capacitor, Ionic, or I think at the moment I'm a bit on a higher level discussion. I can maybe quickly show a little bit what notes I took down, and then maybe we could use the last 20 minutes a little bit to kind of think, okay, what could be potential next steps, or how can we actually start this? So what I put down was, yeah, like with this PWA, and then we had a quick discussion, do the push notification work well, because relatively new features, apparently they somehow work, but then the installation experience might not be great with PWA. Then we dived into, like, maybe make something like a native wrapper, native apps with basically a PWA inside. I think the suggestion, start with a simple app as perfect as possible, with maybe just focusing on a key feature, and then make or let people do simple prototypes with different platforms, and then see kind of what just experience and see what sticks. Then this idea shared code across platform, which is obviously not cross-platform compilation here, but like maybe can we offload a lot of code probably on the back end? Maybe there could be certain code that's easily transferable between different types of platforms. And then I think there was also good discussion, like, do we want to have actually native looking components, or the same, or whatever we call that, gradient styled or not. Then this KMP approach, and also more this general question, like what kind of developers do we actually want to attract? So I think what I want to see is, like, I think this is all super interesting discussions, but like, okay, what should I do next? I think if you guys can help me, like, with this, because that's not, at least now I would be not really know, okay, that's the next step I should do here. So any suggestions here? Are there people in the room that say, okay, like, hey, I want to try something, like yeah, maybe if you guys have any, like, okay, what would you do in my skin, basically? Any suggestion? We have some, I think, some very experienced people here. Like, what would you suggest? It's as simple as that and as difficult as that, I guess.
I would start by defining what the app should, if we agree that it should start with something very simple, and especially if we're going to, like, maybe do different prototypes of different technologies, I would define the scope, like, what does this very simple app need to do? And if it was me, I would say it needs to provide the current air quality for what the user has, like some area that the user has defined for one area, and make it visible without the user having to open an app. This might be hard for web to do, but that's just my dream. That's my dream. So, and then see if this, have different people or teams see if they can achieve that, whatever the scope is, on with this technology or with that technology, or that's
Thanks.
how I
Yeah,
would go about it.
Frank, I think that's a good idea. I'm reading a little bit with one eye the chat. Do you guys think it could be a possibility, what you mentioned earlier, like you go for like a kind of native application and then have a big web view which mirrors the website first, but then the native base would, like what you mentioned, like probably make it easy to have some kind of widgets on the home screen for that particular platform, or what I said earlier, maybe use some of these newer features like lock screen things, but basically have with the web view just have a simple mirror, basically what we have on the website, and then look, okay, where do we have performance issues, and then trying to kind of fix these. And because you have the native underlying platform, you probably have more possibilities there. Do you guys, that could be a thing that could be a way to go, or not? Tim, yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, so I'm thinking I like the direction of trying things out. I think we should make sure that what we are testing is actually helpful for our future development. So having a native app and with the web view sounds good, but most probably is not the main use case, right? So we will not end up being there. So even if we do that, we could do that as a first step just to have something. I think the most important things to test out is the push notifications and the map, right? So we could keep like the full web view as is just to make sure that it loads, and the widget, sorry. The widget would be the first actual useful feedback from a user that we can have on a lock screen. So I think if we could agree that these are the first things, and then we agree in what order we start to play with them, we could let each other to try out different architectures on what tools and what exact things, and then compare them, as was said before. Just I would include certainly the integrated map. Now I don't know what word to use anymore because it's not native, whatever setup you're choosing, the map and the push notification and the widgets, because it sounds like these are going to be the most important things. And I think we need a place, this could be on Discord or on GitHub or whatever we agree, but one place where we can see what architectures people picked, so we can talk about it and we are aware of it, what the other ones are working on. I personally would love to try this. I haven't touched mobile in a while, and Vue never. So this will be a ride if we want to go that way that someone mentioned in the chat, to try to reuse existing components. So obviously there will be a learning curve, but I think this sounds like a fun way to try things out.
Yeah, Paolo, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm not a developer, but I'm a community member. So I've just snuck into this, listening to what you suggested. Is it must be friendly to the developer as well as the community. So definitely simplicity, definitely push notification. For example, in Africa, if we get that orange notification, we have 19 deaths per 100 for asthma. So that orange category, which basically is dangerous levels for sensitive people, people should be warned to have their respiratory medication in there. So that widget is all important with the notification. So just re-emphasizing what the developers have said, but from a community point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Yes, I think it's also really important that sooner rather than later we really bring the community and the developers close together very quickly, to make sure that what we develop as developers really has an impact on the ground. Great. I think something is a bit starting to crystallize in my mind. But maybe one question from our side, because for us, obviously, like kind of managing that project, I always try to walk a very fine line in like kind of not proposing too much from a gradient side. I don't want to, create that impression that we just look for, just cheap labor to do something that we want to do. But on the other hand, I can also see that obviously we have a lot of experience. We know what the communities need, and what I understand now from a couple of people here, it would be actually nice to have like really defined features or mock-ups for that, especially for that, let's say, key features that we need. So, and I think this could be maybe a next step that we say, okay, we could make some proposals. Also, I think it goes very close to Frank, what you described. This is exactly how, like, some of these, I think, Timea, you also mentioned these free features like map widget, some kind of notification. This is how this could really practically look like, like really have a nice mock-up, maybe even with some, graphic assets. I think that makes it always a little bit more fun if we start programming and we have something that's already looking a little bit polished. And then people could, with certain technical expertise say, okay, like this is actually not too difficult. I hack something on a certain platform and see how that looks like, and maybe in parallel, we can look into this kind of hybrid thing, what we discussed, where we feel from our side, we can maybe contribute more because we have more let's say the web people in our, like basically what we can contribute from our side. I'm trying to catch up with the chat, guys. I'm a little bit, Nastya, are you reading this? Is there anything I should bring up?
Yes, I am. So we have a nice suggestion to have a poll, probably in Discord. We can create one. It's a great idea. So, and basically everyone is emphasizing the idea to have somehow sorted the must-haves for the app and the nice-to-have features as well. So yeah, and basically a list of requirements is also an idea to create for the MVP. And there is also an idea from Leo to have a product manager or someone who will help to manage everything.
Yeah, so this is something that I think we can really provide a lot of resource and help with, like this kind of product manager role. On Alaska, Ethan is doing a lot of the feature definitions. He was on the last call, and yeah, we're gonna define this a little bit better going forward. I'm just looking at this. So the idea is to have, so we basically create these kind of widgets, and then we have a poll or get feedback on that. Is that the idea? And then people can start implementing, okay, and form the groups. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. Okay, I'm just trying to catch up here. Leo, could you just quickly explain product and project manager, what's on your mind? Just
Yeah,
for me
sure. I just want to, yeah, just, I mean, these are sort of like industry terms. And again, I've been working in tech for a long time. So yeah, product manager is the person that like us engineers are kind of almost useless without to some degree. I don't know, Frank, if Frank agrees. But the product manager, coalesces the requirements into a requirements document of these are the things that need to exist, and then a designer works with that and makes a design, and then the engineers pick that up and actually go build the thing. And my point is that yeah, there needs to be a PM, and PM is confusing because PM is both product manager and project manager potentially. But yeah, project manager is the one that manages the process, which is what Anastasia said. But yeah, there just needs to be someone to coalesce all the things together. And that I think that it's hard to make the technology decision until like, I mean, even coming to this meeting, right? I didn't know about the push notification thing, for example, right? Or if Frank very, very nicely brought up widgets, like for sure that is that makes a PWA probably absolutely the wrong decision, right? But having that very clear list of must-haves, and the nice-to-haves, just so you don't paint yourself into a corner, I think is key to coming up with that decision.
Yeah, I agree with Leo. I would give a slightly different definition of what a product manager does. It's, in my mind, you're taking the business requirements, you're taking the input from the business and you're translating it into a document, a form that then the developers can work on. So it's like it's an interface between the business and then the technical people. It has to be able to communicate both ways. Talk to the business people, the stakeholders, find out what they want, what they need, and then be able to talk to the developers to find out what they can do given the budget constraints and things like that. And that's very general definition. I don't know how much that actually applies to, I mean, we're doing open source and stuff like that. It's a little bit different, but we do somehow have like business requirements. And those should be driving the development of the app or the apps.
Yeah, and I think for me it's clear now, project and product, at least. I mean, there might be a few slightly different approaches to that, but I think it's clear, and we need both. I think that's also quite clear. Matevs, please go ahead.
Really briefly, I was listening to Paolo, and I can't help but feel that he's actually expressing a sense of urgency to have something that's robust and reliable. But from own experience in research, where we try to use, for example, Nexus 5 and older phones as like cloudlets, IoT little cloudlets on the low cost to reuse old phones and devices with really outdated software stacks, etc., we learned how important it is to have like really robust code base that compiles fast, runs fast, smooth, robust on an older device. So I was just thinking, is that going to be maybe a limitation for which platforms, or rather, not which platforms, how far back in time do we have to go at minimum to inform these requirements even further to make this a more usable application for people? I believe your associate for Cambridge put it for LMIC countries where they might not have the latest gadgets and gizmos for which we might be perhaps thinking to develop for, but they might have an older stack running. I thought maybe to put forth. That's all.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I think that came up last week. I think from community members in Bangladesh, where people often use like relatively old Android phones, I think it's definitely something we have to put on that requirement list, because specifically I think the regions we want to reach, a lot of them, cannot afford like, the latest iPhones and Snapdragons and what's out there. So I think that's actually a really important requirement. And I agree with you if you think about certain things like, what is that, Electron applications that already install your 500 MBs for nothing, just to have some, I don't know, maybe heat your apartment with some CPU load. So I think that I agree. I think this could have a big impact on the technology that we choose, just what's the underlying whatever runtime that it just needs to load the splash screen, basically. So I think that's Matthias. That's, I think, a really good point. I kept a note here to really highlight that, and let's say in that design descriptions, that when people go into a discussion, that they not only think what are the capabilities, can this platform do push notification, but also like, how does that work with, I don't know, some 5-year-old Android phone or something like that. Great. I'm a little bit wary of the time because I think people have also other commitments. I think it's a lot clearer now than 20 minutes ago. So thank you a lot for that guidance. Is there anything else? I can say, from our perspective, yes, I think we can come up with some clearer design documents probably for these 3 items. I think that pretty much covers what we need initially. Then I think, yeah, really using the Discord to discuss that, having some polls, and then hopefully, if some of you are looking for a weekend project and want to hack out a small prototype, and with experience, please come forward. It's always like what I learned with managing like open source project is, okay, like the first meeting you have 60 people and a lot of discussions, and then the commits on GitHub are actually a lot lower, which is normal. But just so, my invitation, if you have some interest and want to push something out, you can also reach out to us directly, and we can provide some support with that kind of stuff. Great. Anything else? Any last? Timia.
I have a question that I think should be clarified here between us and also on GitHub and Discord. What is the main source of truth for discussions? Is it Discord or is it GitHub?
Yeah.
Because I don't know like where to look, or both, or then we should define how their roles differ, so I know where to look for what kind of information.
It's a good point, and I don't have a clear answer yet. I think it's a bit like Discord. It's more like a messenger, it's more real time. I think that's what people like there. It's maybe more accessible with, giving feedback. But I agree. We will clarify that and put it then on both platforms. Yeah, I agree. Great. Anything else from anybody? Then really big thank you. I think this was a really, really good discussion. I really enjoyed it, and it's great to have so much experience in the room. And I think we have some really good starting points now for that. So stay tuned for something we will push out that we can discuss, and then have a follow-up meeting, and hopefully then can really make a comparison with different technologies and see, like, yeah, basically start coding then. Great. So thanks a lot, and see you around. Okay.
Thank you. See
Bye.
you.